children. The third piece they talk about is compensation. And ER9 is really situated well on a national platform, and the search is a national search, on a regional platform, and in the state of Connecticut. In regards to compensation, the only space that will offer a greater compensation package than Easton, Reading, and Region 9 are some parts of Western Connecticut and the majority of Fairfield County. However, with that said, in the example that I used, I believe on Monday evening, I'll use again this evening, the bandwidth in Connecticut is enormous for a small state. Search that I completed in Killingly, which is Danielson, Connecticut, northeastern corner, experienced superintendent, a good superintendent, all in compensation about $175,000. A recent search that I completed about a year ago in Westport, Connecticut, all in significantly north of $300,000. So you can see the space in between. I think the last thing I just want to comment on with the folks that are on this evening, candidates are asking about what are the issues in the community, and we've talked about that. And I think it may be to the surprise of community members is that despite the intensity and the gravity of the conversations that you're having around critical race, around diversity, equity, inclusion, you are certainly not alone. It's a conversation across the country. I think the applicant who is raising their hand saying, I'd really like to be a part of this, they recognize that that's a piece that will be addressed and positioned for the learner. The other piece that's part of the conversation is around governance. And the governance piece is really around time. Time is treasure with school leaders. And where is that all going? And I think I'm really pleased to share that all three boards are really looking within and trying to be really crystal clear with whoever this new superintendent is going to be, what their role is, what the superintendent's role is. I think that's going to be very, very helpful. I anticipate meeting with the hiring committee at some point next week. I anticipate most likely no less than 4 or 5. It could be up to 7 and 8 first-round interviews. I anticipate the hiring committee drilling down to probably 2. It could be 3 or 4. And I believe that if all goes well, your next superintendent could be named as early as mid to late August. So really what that means for the community is that Dr. McMorran is back, and I think that is terrific. He understands the landscape. He will open the school year, and students will go forward. What happens on the candidate side is, in nearly all cases, there's a clause in the leadership contracts, and they usually center around 90 days. So depending on the contract, depending on the finalist, depending on the new superintendent, it could be as late as November where that person actually sits in the chair. It could be much earlier. So that's the best information I can share with you in regards to kind of the timeline, the work. My job is to build the best pool I possibly can. My job is to make sure background checks are thorough. My job is to support the hiring committee in any way that I can. And my job is to be that liaison in between the candidate and the committee. I do want to mention one more thing, and then we're going to move on to listen to your voice. The last thing that I want to share from a candidate's perspective, it is essential for the board to really galvanize around one. And what I mean by that, if the 2 or 3 finalists are all really strong candidates and there's support for all 3 by certain members of the hiring committee, at some point it's really important that whoever that person is still standing has the support of all 3 boards. I can almost assure the hiring committee and the community, if that's not the case, that superintendent of choice will most likely say no. And they'll say no because they do not want to start a new job already with a marker or 2 or 3 markers against them. And I think we all understand that. And lastly, and I'm very sincere when I say this to the hiring committee and to the community, I see this work as so important that if the hiring committee, after doing all kinds of hours of work, if they believe their next leader is not in that pile, we need to do it all over again. That the hiring committee should never settle. And I am certain of the school board members that I know, and I think I know them all, that they will never settle for children for anything else other than what's absolute best. So that's what I'd like to share. Are there any questions before we open the conversation to your voice? Are there any questions around the timeline about who I am or around the expectation of what will be taking place in the next 2 or 3 weeks? Chris, are there any hands that I can't see? Okay. Then folks, I want to move on, and I want to move on in the same respectful manner that took place on Monday. Were there differing opinions? I think there were. Were they shared with great respect towards each other in the room? I absolutely know that that was the case. And what I'd like to do is this. Your voice as a community member is heard in this way. I will present to the hiring committee, and that presentation will also go public onto the website of the ER9 website, a community profile. And really what that means is I listen to all of the voices, I read all of the emails, and I respond to all the text messages. I take all of the information, I put it into an executive summary, and that is how the hiring committee will begin to construct their first and second round interviews. There's themes that are developed, there's focus areas that are developed, there's character traits that are shared, there's skill sets that are talked about. So with that all being said, the question that I have for those that are on this evening is really a simple question, but it's complex. If you could share what you believe is most important for the hiring committee to know to do their absolute best work, what would that message be? And I'm hoping that folks are comfortable and confident to share that information. It's never going to be, I'm looking at my Hollywood square. It's never going to be Jane Paley said. And Jane, the only reason I'm using you as the example because you're right in the middle of my Hollywood squares. It's always going to be with anonymity, but your voice will be heard. So what I'm hoping will take place, if somebody's willing to start the conversation, raise your hand. And again, we're not going backwards. It is not a referendum on past superintendents, and that's really important. I can't allow that conversation, quite honestly. So your thoughts and your comments are really around moving forward. What is most important for the hiring committee to know to do their best work? Who would like to start the conversation?
I see B.
B, go ahead, Chris.
Hi, it's Beatrix Erickson. So for me, I actually have two goals, and it's not just the qualification for the person we're hiring, but also for setting the tone for the work environment that person is going to be inheriting. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you perfect.
Okay. So what little glimpse I've had, I got to meet Dr. Harrison once for like 2 seconds. What little glimpse I've had just being a member of the DEI committee, one of the things that has gone through my mind is making sure that I guess anyone coming into this position has a clear set of goals and broken down into, this is the first step of what we're doing and the second step and the third step, rather than just an overarching goal, which is, this is the end goal with no, I'm not going to say with no support, but perhaps with more clear support of each step that needs to take, that he or she needs to take in order to meet the overall goal of that position. And the other part is, I think, there are different groups that are, I guess, stakeholders in this process, and making sure I would encourage the board or encourage everyone to make sure that the goals outlined for this person is also agreed to by the administrators and the teachers. Otherwise, I think you run into the possibility of having them almost be against each other in certain aspects. So we need a cohesive flow of what an explanation of what this person is going to do, and make sure that he or she has the support to meet to succeed at every step.
You did a beautiful job explaining it. You're talking about coherence and alignment and making sure that everybody, school board, leadership, community is all on the same page going forward. Thank you for sharing that. Further comments, please just raise your hand. Vivian?
Hi, this is Vivian. May I call you Joe? Because I don't know you. It's okay if I call you Joe? Yes.
Absolutely.
Would you mind clarifying what you mean by character? Because I forgot where I read this. One of the things people were concerned about was character. So my question to you personally, with your work, did anyone ever challenge or question your character? And if so, what was the nature of the challenge? And the second part of the question relates to what are the character or characteristics you're looking for in the incoming for the superintendent that's coming on board?
So Vivian, I'm actually blessed. I teach aspiring school leaders, and I share with them in regards to character traits, trust, honesty, and integrity. If you're honest all the time, if you're genuine, if you are who you are, that strong personal credo, you're never in trouble. People may disagree with you, but those are really key elements. And that's what I would suggest that the hiring committee looks at for their next school leader. And I'm certain that there's some agreement to that.
Very good, thank you.
Folks, other comments? Martine?
Hi. So I had the opportunity to listen in to some of the other forums. And, I know that some of the things that people had said and that I just want to echo support for is continuing the work around DEI as we go into the next school year, making sure that we're not status quo, that we're really continuing that conversation, even if it is a challenging conversation to engage in. And I think other folks mentioned making sure that we had someone who is an effective communicator. I think that is important. I think important with all stakeholders. And I say that because I think one of the most important things that we really need to look for our incoming superintendent is someone with really strong support to develop instructional leaders. We have a number of new people in positions, people who are new principals coming in across the 3 districts, and we have new positions at the central office level. And if I'm correct, I think we're looking at 5 new administrators across the 3 districts right now. And being in those roles in this incredibly challenging time requires the leadership of somebody who can stand behind those people and help them grow and develop, so that we are continuing to innovate and improve our instructional practices, and so that we can continue to be amongst the best in Connecticut, that we can continue to look at how we're using data to drive our instructional practices and make sure that we're making smart decisions, and that we're being systematic in how we're using our resources. And I think having so many new people in those roles this coming year, the superintendent really has to be supported by the Board of Education and has to see the priority supporting those instructional leaders, so that way they can do their jobs effectively, because it can be a very lonely job to be in, and especially if there are people who haven't done those roles before, with all of the challenges that we had last year and going into this year. They really need a strong support network to be able to make our schools continue to thrive. I also just want to say, because of the nature of the structure of our tri-board, having someone who is incredibly thoughtful and systematic, who is a systems builder, who understands how to leverage resources and how to distribute leadership is going to be incredibly important, because I think really identifying how that superintendent needs to spend his time, his or her time, in order to be able to get the outcomes that we want as three different districts. They're gonna have to build relationships, and they're gonna have to distribute responsibilities rather than taking everything on themselves. So really looking at those systems and structures, and I know our boards of education have done a remarkable amount of work over the last few years to really try and refine those systems, but looking at that, at the school level too, I think is going to be incredibly important.
Martine, thank you so much. I think I wrote everything down. I got it. And I appreciate your comments. Further comments, again, staying focused on, as the first two speakers, just kind of an executive summary of what you think is most important for the hiring committee to know through your lens as they bring on their next superintendent. Who would like to speak next? B, go ahead.
Sorry, I just had one last thing that I thought. I don't need to dominate, but I will say this. If the person you're hiring, whoever it is, if the mandate of the tri-boards is that they continue the DEI work, if that is the mandate this person is being given, then one of the things that I would say as part of their onboarding in the beginning is for him to have meetings with some members from those marginalized groups. One of the things I've heard a lot in the last 6 months, and it's not a negative reflection on Dr. Harrison. It's, people, I was a person of color. I heard from other people of color. They're like, I'm not really sure that he's really here for me. I haven't met him, haven't heard anything about him. Don't really know him. Don't do anything. If that is a mandate that the board is giving, whoever it is giving to, then that really should be an introduction, a dialogue, a setup of some needs to be there so that we do know that we're supported. If you have someone and you're telling us this is a person we're bringing in to make this happen, but yet we have no FaceTime or no introduction, there's not a connection there.
B, thank you. And I wrote down communication, outreach, community. And I appreciate you clarifying your point. And folks, I just wanted to mention that I am incredibly respectful to the work and the conversation that's happening in your two communities. With that being said, that will be a very important slice for your new superintendent. And I think there's nobody who's on board this evening who would disagree with that. And as you all know, the role and the responsibility is immense. I'm more than happy to stay in that lane. And I just want to make sure that when I play forward to the hiring committee, that it's a well-rounded profile of what you're thinking and what you're looking at. So, Ann, if you would be up next, and then June, you're on deck, that'd be great.
Yes, good evening, Dr. Arardi. Thank you so much for this opportunity. So I am more concerned with what is your position on what would be the best skills for our superintendent. Again, you have a great deal of knowledge now, and in knowing that we are a tri-board district, what do you see as the critical needs for a great superintendent to be here?
And again, this is just my opinion. I'm going to be very brief. And I think the first piece is that your new superintendent has to have the capacity to build a team. I think that Martine may have mentioned you've got a number of moving parts right now. So not only to build the team, to grow the team, and to keep the team. I think that's a real key piece to all of this. And the second, I think that the second most important piece is time. It sounds simple, but it's managing time, how to be effective across 3 school boards, across 5 different schools, and never lose sight of children. That the community outreach is essential. That whoever your next school leader is, if they don't look at the Friday football or the performing of the fine arts or the honor society or the robotics team as something they want to go to, not that they have to go to, it's not going to work. So I believe your next superintendent needs to blend into the communities, recognize, understand the communities. And the tricky part to your question, Ann, is this, is that there's a window that you have to really listen and learn, and then you have to move forward. And things are so complex right now that listening and learning almost is you're on board and you're going. Because we're still talking about a pandemic, we're talking about fragile children coming back on that SEL side, and we're talking about building a brand new team. So, you know, that experience, time, commitment, and being just real. Thank you for asking. June, why don't we go to you next and then to Gail?
Thank you for this opportunity. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
I agree with the team building, but I think parents really need to be involved in part of that team building. And I think that the Board of Education and the superintendent both need to do a better job than what has been done with including parents on a lot of the decision making and things that have gone on, at least informing them of what decisions they have made and telling people what's going on. And the other point I want to make is that I believe that the next superintendent should not be political. Dr. Harrison was very political, and it made a huge divide in this town. And I think that was a very big mistake. And I think that the next person should not be political. This is about teaching our children. This is not about politics. And while politics plays a big role in a lot of things, that position cannot be political. Thank you.
June, I thank you. And I just want to caution the group that this, again, as I stated a half an hour ago, it's not a referendum about the past. And I'm going to ask Mr. Parkin, who's controlling the room for me. I really, I'm respectful, June, to your comment. I don't want this to be about an evaluation of past administrators. So I appreciate us going forward with that in mind. Gail, go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everyone. The only thing I wanted to add is that during the interview process, you know, this is such an important job. And in order to keep someone for the long term, I feel as though the questions that you ask have to be very, very specific to our town. For example, you know, when you go to a corporation and you apply for a job, the candidate often studies that corporation inside and out, the demographics and all. And I don't know how specific your questions are, if they're generic, like, you know, looking for, do they care about kids? Do they care about communicating with parents? But I would go as far as to, even if you hire an outside consultant, to ask that person very specific questions, like, what have you studied that's unique about East and its demographics, and how would you work with that and make that more appealing to bring in other potential families and children to work with the community, to, you know, more specific questions about what their plan is. I mean, I know that people are suggesting that you make clear what your plan is, and that's very important too, because you both work together, the board and the superintendent will work together very closely. But I would focus a lot on having that person present a plan to you. And I don't know what way, if you wanted to do that in stages with written information, or you just wanted to ask, you know, very personal questions. For example, you know, especially, I'm not going backwards, but with what had happened, how would this new superintendent, hopefully having known what's happened in the past, work to change that image here in the school and working with the community to do so. So again, I don't know what very specific things you're looking for, but I would form those into questions about the very specific things to Easton and Reading that you're looking for, and present them, and have that person have time to get back to you and answer those questions. So maybe,
Gail, that's a terrific point, and that's on me. I should have done a better job explaining how that all looks and sounds in the process. You are absolutely spot on. So what happens is that I can tell you what doesn't happen. There are no generic questions that lead to the committee having the inability to separate who goes forward. Questions there's rigor in the questions, and there's relevance in the questions. And then what happens on the second round of interviews, there's actually information provided to the candidate on, I call it a problem of practice, something that's direct and unique and important to ER9. So the candidates do their research. I can also tell you that your candidate pool, once they find out that they have an interview, it's a full-time job. They come with extraordinary knowledge. You talked about the public sector, the private sector. The same thing happens in this process. It's remarkable the homework these folks do. We don't want the final interview to end until there's no question that has not been asked and answered to the satisfaction of the committee. And that's how we try to assure that the fit is right on both sides. So I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts, and actually your thoughts align exactly what the hiring committee will be doing. So thank you.
Oh, that's great. Okay, thank you.
No, thank you. Is there anybody else who's yet to speak for the first time that would like to share their thoughts? Any first-time speakers that would like to share their thoughts? I don't see any hands. Second time, June, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I just want, Dr. McMorrin, you might want to sort of pick his brain. He's held that position for a long time. He does know the ins and outs of that position, and that might be someone you could tap into because knows his way around all the boards. He knows the community. So it might be something that you want to sort of interview him and get his thoughts on, if he was replacing himself, what he would look for based on the community.
Yeah, June, that's a great thought. I'm actually a professional and personal friend of Dr. McMorrin's. We worked together when he was in your region and I was in Newtown, so we know each other. And that's a great suggestion, and I can assure you that will happen. So thank you so much. Folks, I want to pause for a second, only because I don't see hands up. And I'm going to ask the two co-chairs if they have any comments at all that they would like to share at this point of the hiring committee. Cheryl or Marina, it doesn't make a difference who speaks first.
I can just address briefly what I think the hiring committee is going to be looking for from my perspective. I think we're going to be looking for someone who has a strong moral compass and who has an internal plan for the district and can be a leader going forward and will let some of the smaller issues that face the district fall away. I think we are looking, I am looking, first and foremost for a person who is a good and skilled administrator and can put a team in place like Dr. Arati suggested, and that team is going to work for him or her and coalesce around the goals and objectives of the district. Those are some of, but not exclusively, the characteristics that I think I would be looking for as we move this process forward.
Maureen, thank you. Cheryl?
Yeah, I would just add to, first of all, I want to thank everybody for participating, as well as the folks that have participated in the other sessions, as well as people who have sent emails, et cetera. And that's certainly an option as well for those who cannot attend any of the sessions. And all of these are available on recording if people want to listen to it. With respect to the public feedback, I think the common theme that we've been hearing across all 4 sessions and even from the emails are just someone who's a strong leader, someone who can, manage but guide, in terms of the staff and the education, but yet be more of an administrator than perhaps and rely on the administrators in each building to be the educators and provide that guiding force. I think similar to what Martine had said earlier. So it's very consistent from what we've been hearing across the board, and that will help to some degree manage the tri-board governance structure that we currently have. So really looking forward to, and someone who actually can communicate well, command a room, be a consistent communicator so be forceful, but not too forceful, right? But so try to achieve that balance and be a strong but supportive leader. So that's pretty much what we've been hearing from the community. And it seems like that would be something that we'd probably be looking at as the interviews evolve. But certainly, again, as Maureen said, the two of us are only individual members, and there's certainly the board members that have listened as well. All of the other board members have participated in many of these sessions. So I will tell you that for those who haven't participated in the other ones, they've listened to that feedback from the other sessions as well. And we'll all take this into our deliberations and discussions with Dr. Arardi.
Cheryl and Maureen, thank you. Folks, as we wind down the hour, any attendee who's yet to speak who would like to share comments? Is there anybody who has yet to speak that would like to share a thought with the hiring committee with me to play forward? Seeing no hands, is there anyone in the room that has anything to share, final thought, whether it's to me, to the hiring committee? There's a number of school board members that are on this evening. Is there anything else that you believe is important for you to, when you click off the hour, saying, you know what, it was worth my time? Is there any other conversation or any other thought that you would like to share with me, with the board members that are on, and with the hiring committee that are also on? Seeing no hands, I'm nearly certain that everyone has my email and my phone number. I would absolutely welcome the opportunity if you'd like to personalize your thoughts. There are some folks, and I'm very respectful to this, who are a bit reluctant to share on a large platform, but very comfortable in a one-on-one conversation. Just pick up the phone, send me an email, and I assure you that I'll call you back, text you back, email you back to have your opinion sent forward. That would have to take place by this weekend, as I'm putting the profile together over the weekend. Again, applications closing, national, regional, local search closing this Friday, hiring committee meeting with me next week. And then it's really time intensive with the committee for the month of August to get this work done. My commitment to you, and I'm very sincere when I say this to you, I don't know a lot about your region. I think I know a bit. I was fortunate to be a part of the Helen Keller search, and I'm really pleased that Dr. Steve Clapp will be that new principal. I was fortunate to be a part of the John Reed search, and I'm equally pleased that Megan Ward will be your new principal. And I'm excited that I'll have the opportunity to work with the Region 9 board as they look to bring on new leadership at Barlow. So I know a bit about your district. My commitment, I'm sincere when I say this to you, I'm going to work as hard and as smart as I can to build the applicant pool that will be right for the hiring committee. And I am certain from the folks that I know on that committee, and I know them all, that they're going to do what's absolutely best for children. I appreciate everyone this evening being respectful to each other, certainly being respectful to me as the facilitator. And again, don't be reluctant to pick up a phone or to send me an email. Folks, thank you so much for this evening, and I hope everybody has a great night. Thank you.